welcome everyone to our January online arts dinner, looking at mental health. To start this session, I'd like to introduce Auntie Jerry Page from the Mununjali Traditional Elders group, who will be followed by a performance from artist and panellist Karen Roberts, which might set the scene for our discussion.
Thank you, Bronwyn. Minigu, Jingari, Walla, Mulunjali Dargan, which means country that you're standing on here today. So good evening and welcome to Mulunjali country. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Auntie Jerry Page and I'm a Mulunjali woman. My grandmother was Mulunjali, my father, and all my people that live on this beautiful country that we are on today. Mulunjali country means black earth, so we have beautiful black soil in this country. We respectfully acknowledge our elders past and present, who were the caretakers and the custodians of the kinship, the language, the songlines, and the stories that connects us to the Balan, which is the rivers and the waterways. The Borg, which is our mountains that surround us, our beautiful mountains. For protecting these boundaries are our totem, and our totem is the Mibbin. The Mibbin is the eagle. The Wajan is the platypus. And Jingari Jingari. Now, Jingari Jingari in many languages is used everywhere. It says hello, and it's a willy wagtail. So it's either a message. We get a message, and that means that someone who will hear news, or hopefully it's always good news. We don't want to hear the bad news. And Bun is the porcupine. And when I was growing up, my grandmother used to cook porcupine and was very resourceful. We used to use it for oil, and they used to use the quills for making their art, and they recycled everything with the animals. The Gullamilli, which is the water hen, and our Baban are our dream stories. So we respectfully acknowledge elders present to continue the connection to our country, to continue the spiritual connection to the kinship, the language, and the songlines and our stories. Before I go any further, I know that this art dinner is about mental health and mental awareness. So I had put some words together today, not words, but just things that we need to connect with our people of all cultures about mental awareness. And if it's just ringing up and having a cup of coffee, to say, are you okay? There's so many people out there that suffer with this mental awareness, with mental issues. So, and it doesn't matter what culture, where you're from or who you are. So it's important that we stay connected and we say, are you okay? And just to be there for one another, regardless of what our culture is. And also, I would also like to acknowledge the future elders and entrust the role of the caretaking and the custodian onto them, keeping the existence of our people and our cultures alive. I'd also like to thank Bronwyn and the rest of the artists that are here tonight for inviting me along this evening, your invitation is always is blessed by us, and we're happy to always be a part of that. So, Naya Naya Bayi, which means we never say goodbye, we'll see you again. Thank you.
So now we'll cross over to Karen.
It's Christmas Eve. Everything is unravelling around me, pulling apart at the seams. Nothing appears in sync. All is mixed up in my head. I cannot think straight. I hate myself. I'm ugly. I'm awful. Life is terrible. I'm standing on the balcony looking out into the distance at trees on a hillside. I'm gazing at one in particular, taller than the rest, and a jagged, rugged shape. I'm not thinking about how majestic this tree is, how beautiful or tall, but I'm thinking, I could hang myself from that tree. I consider this before I consider jumping off the balcony or taking all the medication in my cupboard. I don't know who to call. There seems no way out. I am at my lowest of lows and in a deep, dark place. I am faced with a decision to make. There is always light at the end of the tunnel. Try to see the positive side of every situation. You can rise above adversity and beat the odds by maintaining wellness strategies. Start by speaking the truth. Do you ever feel as if you're changing your colors? Like a sky at sunset or one in a storm? As if you're the incredible northern lights? Like a blushing bride, a leaf over autumn, or my good friend, Mr. Sunshine, a ray of golden light. Or, of course, the chameleon, ever-changing when it steps on a new invitation of different hue. I often feel as if I'm changing my colours or mood, effervescent whilst battling the surrounds, worried about the next onslaught by natural causes. Oh no, please no, help me, no, oh I can't bear it, no, stop it, no, help me, no, no, no. Or do you feel red or yellow or gold, heating up like the blistering sun as if you're on fire? Radiating warmth in your autumn leaves as you happily fall down from the trees. Or majestic and proud in a sunset, wildly glowing for all the world to gloat over your beauty. I love feeling like this. It is magical, isn't it? When do you feel high and when do you feel low? Oops! Can I say that? Is it kosher to speak of subjects such as this? I don't care what the establishment says. We have to. Speak now or forever hold your war and peace. The topic? Mental wellness. I shan't say illness, for I'm here to talk about prosperity and rising above the demons. Although they be there, many of them, and in various shapes and sizes, the horrors, the nasties. Shall we get them out of the way in the early stages of this session? I think so. It's best for all parties concerned, really, if you can vent the bad. That way you can make way for the wonderful, the daylight, the acceptable. But those beasties been going to places no one really wants to go, traveling the low road. Though you may think you are surviving at the time, it's a battle you're engaged in from go to woe, and a savage one at that. A battle of your mind's eye, from deep inside the soul, pending examination from the heart. Well, I wonder why all is is not as it seems. Why life will turn hopes into fallible dreams. Why people must feign their attitude, their name, their age, their thoughts, their mood. Why the female is shy and the male is strong, and when reversed, why it will be seen as wrong. To know is what we seek. Please let the tongue of a wisdom speak. To know the truth to find. Please educate my humble mind. To know it is my goal. Please lift and love my aching soul, yeah.
That is a powerful way to
Yes.
start this conversation. Thank you, Auntie Jerry and Karen. You can see more of Karen's performance in Chameleon on the 23rd of April at the Vondiunga Community Centre, and tickets are available through Live at the Centre website. I'm Bronwyn Davies from Scenic Rim Regional Council. We encourage those who are joining us on the live stream tonight to post any questions in the chat room, and we will ask the panel as we go through. Please let us know where you are from also when you do that. Also to let you know, this conversation will be posted on the Arts Dinner Facebook page and the artsdinners.com site after the show, and we encourage you to share it widely. It's a tricky topic, mental health, and it's something that artists have a higher than average tendency of. Tonight we're looking at how current events are impacting our mental health and the health of the arts sector, how we can manage burnout, how we can look after our mental health, and in what ways the arts can help us to keep our equilibrium. I'd like to introduce our panel tonight. Coming all the way from Western Australia is Sarah Borg, a clinical psychologist working with creative people. She was formerly an actress, and some of Sarah's favourite recent works include exploring resilience and self-care for entertainment and arts industry professionals. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi.
Hi, Sarah. I'd also like to welcome back Jeff and Julie Crabtree. Together they are authors of the book Living with a Creative Mind. Individually, Julie is a psychologist in private practice working extensively with creative people. Jeff is an award-winning songwriter and producer currently working on the completion of his PhD on issues of workplace health and safety in the contemporary music industry. Welcome to Jeff and Julie, who are coming to us from Sydney. Hello.
Hi, Bronwyn. Hi, everybody.
Great to see you again. You've already met Karen Roberts. She's a performer, singer, actress. She's performed at festivals all over the world, toured throughout Queensland, written several children's books, and is the winner of a Helpman Award. And she's coming to us from her home tonight in Brisbane. Welcome, Karen.
Hello, how are you?
Very good. And we're here tonight, we're joined in Beaudesert by Challee O'Reilly. She's a practicing psychologist with 20 years experience and has a special interest in clients affected by traumatic experiences. She's also chair of the Greater Beaudesert Regional Mental Health Network. Welcome, Challee.
Hi, thank you.
And welcome everybody. And I'd like to say at the very big outset to acknowledge on behalf of all our panellists, the traditional owners of the lands from wherever we are broadcasting to in Australia, as well as where all the speakers and performers are coming from, and acknowledge those traditional owners, and also say always was, always will be Aboriginal land. So I'd like to ask everybody the question. So we'll start off with Sarah. What I wanted to know was, what do you think, what is mental health to you, and how do you know when you have it and when you don't have it?
It's a great question. We could talk all night about it, really, couldn't we? In a really little snapshot, the key things I think about are similar to what was in Karen's opening. That idea of in life, we're shifting and we're balancing all sorts of different things and shifting states and almost, doing different aspects of our life. And for me, mental health is when it feels like all of that is okay. We can do all the things that we need to do. We can wear all the hats that we need to wear, We can also shift sort of in an efficient way between all of those different states, and it feels okay. It doesn't feel overwhelming. And so then sort of signs that our mental health is becoming a little bit more tricky can be things like our inner experiences either become different, or we can feel sort of stuck or sort of preoccupied with our inner experiences, so things like thoughts and feelings, or likewise we can feel very distant from those things. So I think of mental health when it's going well. We're able to have a lovely rhythm and a lovely balance with everything, you know, that we want to do in our life and our identity, the world, other people. And when it's becoming tricky, the shifts become tricky, or we feel stuck, or we feel disconnected with those things.
That's really an interesting perspective. Jeff and Julie, what do you define, or what do you call mental health, and when do you know when you're not in that space?
Well, Bronwyn, I'm going to defer to the doctor, Dr. Julie. You know, my doctorate is there a doctor in the house? Yes, but I can't save your life. So over to you, Julie.
I think it's a challenging question, and I agree with Sarah. You can spend all week talking about that idea, and I think it depends the lens in which you look at. And one of the lenses I like to look at when I think about mental health is almost like a mental dashboard, where you look at yourself in terms of your thinking, you look at yourself in terms of your behavior, you look at yourself in terms of your emotions, you look at yourself in terms of how you are relating relationally, and even if this is a framework you like, how you relate spiritually. And I think it's quite nice to have to kind of think and just kind of go, how am I going? What's my dashboard with those things? Because you can be going really well relationally, but you can internally, you can be quite impoverished. You can seem as though kind of emotionally you're going well, but your thoughts are racing. So I quite like the idea of just having an internal dashboard that you can check up against. And I like the word that Sarah used, which is stuck. When you feel that there's some parts of you that get stuck, I think that's a kind of early warning sign that you may be needing to work on some aspects of yourself.
That's good. Challee, what do you think about that? What do you think are the first signs, or the signs that, you know, what defines good mental health and ill health, I guess?
Sure. I think that mental health is often considered by comparison to mental ill health, and I don't know that that's the best way to look at it. I don't think mental health means an absence of any types of mental illness symptoms. I think what it's about, at essence, is about being comfortable with yourself in all the different aspects of yourself, who you are, how you think, how you feel, being comfortable, and being comfortable in your relationships with other people and in your life and your world context. And I think that when we are feeling uncomfortable in any of those areas, that's our body, our inner self speaking to us and letting us know that in one of those areas we're out of balance. So that can be something that not many other people might notice. It may be something that the individual is aware of, an uncomfortableness that is invisible to others, or it may be something that's very visible to others.
That's very interesting. So, of course, we've just spoken to some professionals who deal with people with mental health issues, but I'd like to talk to Karen, who has a lived experience of that. Karen, what do you think? Like, what is it for you that says that you're not going so well? What is it that, what are the signals for you?
Well, my experience with mental health and what my cabaret is all about is about mental wellness. It's not about mental illness or about mental health. It's about mental wellness. and about how to maintain being mentally well. So mental wellness for me is doing things like eating well, exercising, maintaining good relationships with people, speaking about issues, taking your medication and not stopping medication when you think you're okay and thinking, oh, I don't need to take it anymore. And sticking to things that your psychiatrist has recommended for you, like taking medication. Finding worthwhile things to do in life. Sticking to doing all those kinds of things for me promotes mental wellness. And even when I maintain doing all these things for mental wellness, I will still have, with my bipolar, flare-ups, usually with highs, because I exercise so much, I tend to release a lot of endorphins and serotonin, and I don't tend to get the depressive side of my illness. But I will still get the elevated side of my illness from time to time. That can be through doing too many social events in one little stretch, or not getting enough sleep over a certain period if I do too much, or if I have a performance coming up and I've been rehearsing and I get very excited about that and my adrenaline levels go up, that can spur on an episode. So purely just getting excited about an event coming up can incite an episode for me. And there's so many factors that come into play, even though I maintain things to make myself mentally well, that can incite an elevated episode for me, that I have to be very careful to deal with all those factors as well and lead a very balanced lifestyle so that I don't become unwell and have to watch myself for it could be 2 weeks to a month of taking more medication, de-stimulating myself and being very careful so that it doesn't escalate into a hospital episode or something.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. That's very insightful. And I think that the panel all have agreed on the same things. It's understanding yourself and being able to kind of look at the things that you need in your toolbox. And we're going to talk a little bit about the mental health toolbox a bit later on. So thanks, Karen. That's really very interesting. I might go to Sarah. Sarah, your early career was as an actor and gave you insight into the sector. And since March last year, you're working with the Perth Festival and Circuit West on the Connection Project, which was in a response to COVID-19 and the effect on the arts industry. Can you tell us about the project and what have been the learnings and breakthroughs?
Yeah, sure. So the project came about, it was probably about April last year when COVID and restrictions were really kind of beginning to hit for the first time. It seems like such a long time ago now. But it was really a response to, in a very short period of time, we had COVID, we had some really unhelpful arts funding decisions, some really punitive arts funding decisions come. And there was also this sort of zeitgeist in the sort of, the general world about what is an essential worker? Art's not essential. And so there was COVID, there was arts funding, and there was this real sort of identity hit. And the sector really was I think we were all in a bit of a state of crisis, sort of personally, professionally, and sort of existentially as well. So the project came about because we really wanted to offer an opportunity for the sector to come together. It was a time of sort of great isolation and great fragmentation. So we really wanted to offer an opportunity for people to come together and connect, while also offering an opportunity to learn more about what is it like to operate when you're in a kind of crisis situation? What is it like to operate when you're dealing with this degree of stress? So the project offered sort of, and it was open to everybody in the WA sort of industry. It offered sort of once a fortnight, we had sort of a big Zoom, which was myself and 2 other psychologists sort of introducing a relevant topic, whether it was about, you know, what is a stress crisis and what happens to us in that situation, what might be some useful things that we want to think about, you know, in terms of, you know, is it learning about compassion? Is it learning about mindfulness? So sort of introducing a different topic. And then in the next week, we would offer sort of small group Zooms, which were exploring that topic in a little bit more detail. And it was great. I mean, we had a really lovely uptake in it. I guess we learnt a lot, and I could talk about it all day too. The main ones, I think, which are particularly relevant for people who weren't involved in the project too, was that idea of, you know, you can have a kind of working knowledge of things like mental health, mindfulness, stress coping. We kind of have that. Most people, and I think a lot of artists, have a kind of rational nuts and bolts understanding of that. But when things really get tricky, it's kind of hard to draw on that knowledge, especially if it's the first time that things have become a little bit wobbly for you. So I think we really learnt that it's important for artists to have a working knowledge of stress coping and individual warning signs. It's important for artists to feel like there is a space in the workplace to talk about mental health in a workplace appropriate way. But also it's quite appropriate for people to have an understanding on, okay, what's my stuff? And what do I kind of need to do a little bit more work on outside of the work sector? So I think one of the big things we took away from the project was that idea of there is absolutely a place to be thinking about mental health within a work context, but there's also a place to think about where is that boundary for you and where is work appropriate stuff and where is kind of things that you want to work on more individually outside of a work context. Because we're artists, you know, work blurs across so many aspects of our life. I think it's really important to have an idea of where that boundary sits for you individually as an artist.
Interesting. That's really good. I was going to talk to you a bit about burnout, but we might come back to that because I think I really want to dive into that a little bit too. We might go to Jeff and Julie. You also work with creatives. So we've got 2 psychologists who specifically work with the creative sector, which is really interesting. Why do you think they suffer with a high incidence of mental health issues?
Well, the research that I was engaged in was looking at the unique vulnerabilities of highly creative people. And what we understand is that there is if you like, a genetic overlap between those that are highly creative and those with schizophrenia and bipolar. So thank you, Karen, for talking a little bit about your journey. Really appreciate that. And what it means that for the creative, there are often what we would call vulnerabilities that are associated with the journey of being creative. Some of those things are the fact that, you know, creative people are divergent thinkers, which means that they think fast, make lots of associations. It can develop into the type of very quick thinking that Karen was talking about. But just as a creative person, learning how to manage the fact that they think fast. And that when you think fast, you can go from feeling calm about something to catastrophizing about situations. And right now, with everything that's going on for the creative, their imaginations, their ability to vividly imagine, you know, scary situations is very heightened at the moment. So it's the ability to think quickly, to have an incredible imagination that can actually shift very much into anxious thinking. The other aspect of those vulnerabilities that I want to touch on is the ability to think deeply, to feel deeply your own pain and other people's pain. So today I was working with a number of kind of highly creative people. There's a couple of things. One was, as a divergent thinker, having to go on social media for their work and their platform, the fact that suddenly they're in this area of obsessive thinking and paranoid thinking because they're wondering what people think. And that's a very, very unique vulnerability that can impact mental health for the creative. The other is just the ability to feel deeply. So learning how to manage the fact that you feel so deeply and you interact with people when we can interact with people. And for so many creative people now, they are feeling deeply the loneliness, the distress, the pain, even the kind of global distress. And they're feeling it and carrying that. And unless you learn how to manage some of those things, it can really have such a powerful impact on your mental health.
So, speaking not as a researcher tonight, Bronwyn, but as a practitioner. So I had the same experience today. This is the first time we've spoken about our day because we've just connected here online. I had the same experience today, but it was my experience, and I was engaged in 2 different projects, one of which left me with such despair that I essentially had to leave 3 hours of the day to try and claw my way out of it before I could move into a really beautiful creative space. I'm involved on the one hand, dealing with people who are researching creative industries. That was the painful experience. And on the other hand, I'm in the middle of writing a script. And so it felt like I had to climb Mount Everest to get out of I think the feeling that the word I think that Challee used was overwhelmed. And I just wanted to say that I feel overwhelmed so often, actually. As a creative practitioner, it's that feeling of being overwhelmed, though, that gives me the resources I need to write the next piece of dialogue, or the next piece, or the next scene, or the next song, or whatever it is I'm working on.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's the strength of being creative is also the weakness or the challenge.
The strengths and the weaknesses, they're just 2 sides of the same coin.
And I think I love the language that's around right now, which is not about looking at through the lens of illness, but looking at through the lens of how you learn to manage, how you develop your own unique strengths that help you be the best you in the circumstance.
We're going to dive into that quite a lot when we go back to that conversation about the toolkit. I might just go to Challee. You work because I want to bring in that regional context as well, because most of our speakers, I forgot to mention that Sarah's actually coming to us from Western Australia. But I think most of our speakers are actually coming from cities, whereas Challee will practice here in the regional area, and we're going out to regional Southwest Queensland. I'm sort of wondering, your experience has there been an increase in your services, and in what areas of mental health are you seeing this increase, particularly because we're in the regional area?
Yeah, look, most definitely we've seen a huge increase in demand for assistance with psychological or mental health issues, to the extent that, having been in private practice here in Bow Desert for more than 20 years, last year was the very first time that we had to start turning people away because we were not able to meet the demand. Now, whilst most of this demand was not exclusively related to COVID, personally, I've seen very few people who are accessing psychological services purely focused on the distress of COVID. However, people's experience of this pandemic has been a component of just about all of the presentations that we've seen. So it's like this extra level of stress and, to some extent, trauma has elevated the the distress that people were living with prior to the pandemic. In regional areas, I think that people have really felt deeply the change in the way that they interact with their community. Here in the Bow Desert and region communities, people are used to a lot of interaction with others, and a sense of community that may be present in cities, but in a very different way than you experience it in country and regional areas. What people here are used to is when they do their shopping, they see faces that they know. They may not even be acquainted with those people, but they're familiar. And people look at one another and people smile at one another and they chat to the person on the checkout. Outside of shopping, some of our elderly members of our community go to church every Sunday and they talk to people who they've known for 50, 60 years, maybe longer, their whole life. And these little rituals of connection have been greatly challenged during the pandemic. People have had to order their groceries online. Church services haven't happened. We're not going to the local musical society's presentation, production. All of these things are not occurring. And so our ability to connect with one another and feel a part of a community seems to have been really greatly challenged. And so, of course, that rolls out into loneliness, feelings of isolation, and just a sense of the whole world being so different, and that feeling of pressure to adapt and to adapt quickly to a whole new world, I think has imposed a huge burden of stress.
It's interesting, isn't it? What would you say to someone who is going through those, they're feeling their mental wellness is not doing so well? What would people who might be listening and who might be concerned about somebody, what would you suggest that they do in these times?
Yeah, for sure. Look, it really is different for every person. Every person has a unique experience, or as humans, we have some common experience, but for each person it is different. And I encourage people to work on connection with themselves. If you're not able and there are barriers to you connecting with other people, connection with self is very important. Becoming more mindful of what's important to you, your values, where you want to grow, how you want to grow, what shape you want your life to be. So you can do that in a connection, and then trying to be creative in the ways that you connect with others, and being open to new ways of connecting with others and new others that you may connect with. You can replace those looks at the other shoppers in Woolworths with looks at your neighbours over the fence, etc. And I do think being creative, expressing in some way what you're experiencing, and that's one of the areas in which the arts has so much to offer. And I think we have seen via social media and what we see out there in the public domain that people have been turning to the arts and utilising the arts to help to process and work through what they're experiencing through the pandemic. I'll never forget when we saw, I think it was Spain went into lockdown quite early, and people in big apartment complexes, someone would come out and begin singing a beautiful aria, and it was like a gift to everybody else. And I'm sure it really helped everyone who was sitting alone in their own apartment
Well, it's good for the person who's singing, and it's also good for the people who are listening. So that's the power of the arts. And I think we'll touch a little bit on nature as well, because I think that's a similar type of gift to help us come back to centre. Karen, we've heard from, as I said, the rest of the panel. How has last year had an impact on you? How have you coped with the isolation, not being able to perform? How have you found it?
Well, I actually tried to take advantage of the situation, and I tried to keep on performing despite the COVID restrictions. And my partner, Dave, who I live with, who's doing all the tech tonight for me. And if you could see the setup in the room, we've got lights, we've got a sound desk, we've got full tech and cameras pointed in 3 directions and all sorts of things. We got an online setup, and we live streamed 2 jazz gigs during the pandemic last year, and we live streamed a performance of my cabaret as well, because I thought getting a performance about mental health issues out there to people, particularly during that time when, as everyone on the panel has said, people were suffering with mental health issues, not just in the arts industry, but people in the broader spectrum were suffering with mental health issues from the pandemic. I thought it might be helpful to have some kind of entertainment that touched on mental wellness for them to see. So I put that out there, and we did the 2 jazz gigs, and I kept up my rehearsals with my pianist, because he was just one person coming over to my place. So I kept my arts creativity going by doing that. I kept healthy by doing YouTube exercise, because I couldn't go to the gym. So I exercised 5 days a week with 45-minute cardio workouts. I kept eating well. And as far as Dave and I coexisting with each other, Dave was working from home, and he had strict guidelines about when he would start work, when he would finish work, about being in the office, and what he had to do in the office. And we coexisted really well together. And I'll admit that it's not easy being around someone 24/7, but you make it work, and you find ways to adjust to the situation. And I kept doing FaceTime appointments with my psychiatrist, and I kept seeing my psychologist. So I kept up with my health routine, which was absolutely imperative, because I needed to get guidance on my mental health. I took all my medication. I did Zoom chats with my friends to keep social connections going with them, because that was very important. And I saw my family when I could, because we were allowed to see a couple of people like family and that kind of thing. So I tried to do everything I could to keep my mental health as good as it could be, and keep Dave's mental health as good as his mental health could be. And we survived pretty well in keeping my craft alive and keeping each other alive and surviving it. Yeah.
That's great. That's really good. I'm glad to hear that. And I think that leads on to a couple of things I wanted to talk about before we finish up is that I wanted to quickly go back to Sarah before I go to the next question, which was about burnout, because I think there's a range of things that trigger our mental health, ill health, I guess you could say. And I'm just thinking about people who are in communities, who are the doers in our communities, who are the people who are volunteering. And I really think that in regional areas, often it's that kind of mental health burnout. Sarah, what do you think about that? Because that can affect anybody, any stage and age. What advice would you give to people who are going through burnout or to prevent burnout?
Yeah. And I think it's an important question because I think, we often say, oh, I don't want to get burnt out. I want to prevent myself from being burnt out. But then the flip side is, look, sometimes things happen beyond our control and we find ourselves in a state of burnt out. And we certainly don't want to be there going, oh gosh, I'm such a terrible person, I'm burnt out. Oh, I didn't do a good job, I'm burnt out, and that kind of thing. So I think that's important to think about right from the start, that sometimes despite our best efforts, we find ourselves in a place of burnout. And I think particularly if we are doers or volunteers or we like being busy, or exactly like Julie said, creatives, that switch which turns our mind off is a little bit harder to turn on to switch that off for creative people. So we find that if it's not our body going and doing things or producing things, it's our mind going. So I think two strategies are, one is whatever it means for you, genuinely know how to switch off from on mode. So that means know what your on mode looks like, know when you're in that state of high productivity or creativity, or even if it's your game face when you're in a foyer at an opening or, in an interview with someone, know what being on feels like and looks like for you, and then know what works for you to turn it off. Because I'd encourage everybody to think about turn off your on mode every day, multiple times a day. So, and really have, the strategies are going to look different from person to person. Gold star is, even if it's controlled breathing, release your breath, get in touch with your breath, or release the tension in your body, slow the pace that you're walking at, drop your voice, or, whatever it might be. Just have something in your toolbox so you know when you're on and you know how to genuinely switch it off. And that's going to have really lovely payoffs, not just at times when you are burnt out, but at times when you can feel the kind of exhilaration going. Sort of switch it off, and know that it's within your power to switch it on again.
No, that's great. Jeff and Julie, what advice do you give to creatives to avoid mental health pitfalls?
I mean, one of the things that we can control is our perspective and our lens on things. And I would encourage us all to work on being able to facilitate our perspective. I mean, we're in the situation, being in Sydney, Northern Beaches, where we suddenly found ourselves in lockdown. And that was over a fairly significant period of time. And working on your approach and your perspective around those things. And it's hard work, but it is something that you can control. You can develop that ability to ask yourself, what are you grateful about? What is good in this environment? What do you value? What's worthwhile? And I said that is something that you and only you can control. And I would put out a challenge to everyone to be working on that, to be working on their perspective with that. Do you want to add
look, one of the things, during the lockdown, one of the things that happened was I started posting on my Instagram feed, because we were making I was making coffee for the family. I started posting my latte art, which is horrendous. Well, they basically, they look like works of modern art. And so I constructed an entire comedy that went for 134 episodes of lockdown latte art. And so then there was laughter. So that's one of the ways in which you can change your perspective. And the thing about it is the creative mind is good at this. So what creative thinkers, what we're good at, and this is for everyone watching really, you're good at being adaptable and flexible and then making new patterns out of existing things. So out of my latte art is emblematic of that. So, you know, I think my personal recommendation is use that flexibility and adaptability to invent. And invent and make. Can I just, like Julie, want to compliment Karen. Karen's description of her coping strategies is like a playbook, really.
Yeah.
You know, she what did she do? She adapted, she pivoted, she made, and then she did all she could to connect socially under the limited circumstances. And then the other thing she mentioned, I think, is incredibly important. You know, rest, diet, and exercise. And they're at the top of her list, and I would be at the top of my list. As well as the being willing to be adaptable and flexible. That it's the one thing, you know, if I can say, you know, and I agree with Sarah, you got to be able to switch yourself off. And, you know, we have a daily mindfulness practice, so that's lapsed a little bit. But one thing you don't want to switch off is your ability to think across the line of other things, that sort of crossways, divergent thinking. You don't want to switch that off in times of need, because it can really be your friend, because that's what will help you make yourself laugh, will help you find a new solution, a new answer.
To laugh at yourself, I like that. So humour is obviously a fantastic thing to put in the
toolbox.
Into the toolbox. I listened to a Radio National talk this morning, and they were talking about the need for silence in the busyness of our environments, and also getting in touch with nature. And I'm just wondering, those things come up in terms of what should be in our toolbox. I'm just wondering, Challee, what you think, what would you advise people to, living here in the Scenic Rim or in regional areas, what would you advise people to put in their mental wellness toolbox?
Yeah, look, I think a lot of people have mentioned already a number of the things that I would have high up on that list. I agree with Julie entirely, and maybe that's our profession speaking, that mindset is an amazing thing and something that we need to be quite creative with. I think the human condition is to sometimes have a problem-focused mindset and a fairly attunement to the negatives in situations, because we're natural problem solvers. And so we look for problems and then we'll ponder ways to solve them. And having a positive mindset or an adaptive mindset is one that doesn't ignore problems or pretend that they don't exist, but one that takes a different perspective on the challenges that we're facing and looking for opportunities, looking for excitement about growth and excitement about learnings. And I love Jeff's idea of trying to see the humour in some of these everyday situations. The more we can laugh, the better. It's one of the best medicines. But I also think there are a number of other things working on your self-esteem. You know, if you're isolated at home, you're not able to do many of the other things that you normally can do. Working on your self-esteem, trying to like yourself a little bit more, going through and making a list of your achievements, things that you know to be your strengths, reflecting in that positive way about yourself. That's something we don't often take the time to do. It feels like an indulgence to do that when we're so busy. And in these times when we're not so busy, it's maybe a great opportunity to work on something like that. And I think finding new ways to sit with the emotion that you're feeling, different ways to process that emotion. I think our natural instinct as human beings, when we're experiencing something that's uncomfortable, is to try to push it away, to try to make a barrier between that discomfort and ourself. While we have this extra time and this private space, finding new ways to be able to sit with that emotion and not fight it so much, allow it in our space, helps us to look at it and to begin to process it differently so that we can learn to live with it
manage it and be able to carry that with us and still be adaptive, so it's not such a stumbling block for us. That would be something that I would suggest. Connection with the environment as well. Other people carry a danger in a time of pandemic that they may transmit this virus to us, or that we may transmit it to them, but we don't have that with the trees. We don't have that with the land. So it's a wonderful time for connecting with nature. And I know one of the days when I was at home, I've still been lucky enough to be able to go into my practice and work, but we've had some days at home when we weren't able to do that. And it was in one of those beautiful rainy days that we've had plenty of recently, and that we hadn't seen for some months prior. We could see the spotted gum trees outside our windows where we live, and they had already shed their bark. So they were in that beautiful smooth stage with all the little divots, and with the rain, there were so many different colours shining through on the trunks. And I've lived in the same house for more than 20 years, but it occurred to me, wouldn't this make a beautiful art installation to photograph these trees at various times over the next few weeks as they change and grow back their covering that they'll shed again next year, see them dry, see them wet, things like that. That is connecting with nature and appreciating the beauty that's right there in front of us, that we're oftentimes too busy, too rushing around to see. I hate to think how many times I've missed the beauty of those trees.
I think that's a really interesting point. It comes back to an exhibition we had where we asked about what should people do to care for country, and that's what they always said, to stop, to listen, to come back to ourselves. I'm just going to reflect on, we've had one of the chats, Nikki is reminding us about a poetry project that's happening at the end of May at the QUT Gardens Point campus. It's a festival will feature new works of originating from New South Wales Uni. It's a forum for artists and mental health professionals, lots of major partners waiting on funds. Yeah, so anyway, if you're interested, you can email nigel@momentumarts.com.au. Okay, all right. So lots of fantastic ideas, and at the end of this session, we're going to post some contacts if you've got concerns or you would like some leads about where you can go to ask more questions. But right now, we're going to close tonight with another performance by Karen Roberts. Thank you all for listening. We'll hope to see you next month at Miles, where we're going to be talking about public program. But for now, thanks for joining our conversation about mental health, and we'll go to Karen Roberts. Thank you. Good night.
Sweet kisses and embraces too. What's on the menu from you? I respond with smiles and sighs, but what is mirrored in your eyes? The signals I get week after week are contradicted when you speak. Chameleon, why do you change? Chameleon, at closer range. Chameleon, don't it seem strange? Keep your skin, don't rearrange. Words so cool with hard punctuation. Where do I fit in this situation? Am I simply a dish on the side? Do I bring any sense of pride. Hold me close, then push me away. Make up your mind, 'cause I'm not gonna stay. Chameleon, why do you change? Chameleon, at closer range. Chameleon, don't it seem strange? Keep your skin, don't rearrange. Positive are consequences when you break down all your fences. Let me see what's on your mind instead of feelings been declined. Chameleon, why do you change? Chameleon, at closer range. Chameleon, don't it seem strange? Keep your skin, don't rearrange. Interested, you beg on call, then you seem to just ignore. I try so hard, my soul does shout, this ain't what love should be about. What do you want? What do you need? Don't leave my tender heart to bleed. Chameleon, why do you change? Chameleon, at closer range. Chameleon, don't it seem strange? Keep your skin, don't rearrange. Chameleon.